So I believe I found Batman's evil son, from crashing planes, kidnapping the president of the United States, to blackmailing pilots to sleep with minors, burning old women alive, putting a bounty of $10,000 on the head of every policeman in the city, and even making a gay boy impregnate his own sister.
Jesus is Lord!
For those of you who are wondering, it is not Dick Grayson or Damien Wayne or any of the other Robins. Does he wear a cape? Check. Operates at night? Check. But the really interesting part is that unlike the Dark Knight, this boy makes Daddy Batman proud by fighting on behalf of crime. I'm not going to pull your curiosity and just tell you, but before that, here's a gifted advice. I'm about to reveal things that will make you hate your eyes, your ears, and that's just the easy part. While reading this comic, there were times I had to pause and go touch grass so that Mother Nature may purify me, or listen to running water and let it wash through me. So please, I beg of you, if you cannot take it, this is your opportunity to run and run fast. But the first question is, where did Nemesis come from and why? Initially, the story tells us that Nemesis was once known as Matthew Anderson and his parents were rich. Now, I'm not talking Forbes rich, I'm talking generational rich. But they were very bad people. Basically, they were responsible for organizing a club where the rich and powerful come to hunt runaway teenagers for sports. Unfortunately, they were caught by the police. But while his father had immediately committed suicide, his mother was taken into custody and faced the death penalty. And here we really get to see the very juicy part, because we see that the incredible achievements of Nemesis as he roamed the world started at just the age of 12. At 12, he was already a gang lord. At 15, he was Asia's largest drug exporter. And at 23, he was already the head of a death cult. Such a time, Nemesis decided to finally carry out his mother's dream of having revenge on the cop that ruined his family. Do you guys see where I'm going with this? Does this remind you of this guy? Oh wait, there is more. Now, this story literally begins with policemen armed to the teeth rushing into a building, all in an attempt to save their chief of police. But we later discover that this is unfortunately the wrong location and they are blown to bits. Meanwhile, the real chief of police is tied up in a dark cave with Nemesis having a conversation with him. What is truly peculiar here is the fact that Nemesis states again and again that he does not intend to kill the chief of police. At least not yet. This is something to take note of in the story, because he never kills his targets, nor does he let them die until a set date and time. And he always sends them a card of that set date and time a long time before he screws up their world. Another thing he enjoys doing is exposing the hidden corruption or secrets of these police officers before ending them. When the time was right, Nemesis walked away from the room, leaving the chief of police behind. But here we see that this is not actually a room, but a railway track. And before the police chief could finish cursing at Nemesis, the train smashed into him, turning him into mush and human piece. His organs grinded under the train against the tracks, after which the train knocks off course and smashes bloody head first into a city. But the most devious thing to happen in this comic is still yet to come, so stay with me a bit. You see, Nemesis already had his eyes set on America, on Washington DC to be precise, because he believed that in Washington he would find a worthy opponent, which leads us to the supposed good guy of the story, the chief of police of Washington. Yeah, we get to see a glimpse of what the chief of police of Washington is capable of doing, as we see him effortlessly take out two armed robbers in a store. This guy simply walked through the back door and pretended to be one of the hostages, and bam! It turned out that the armed robbers were too stupid. They did not count the hostages and therefore did not notice that the chief was carrying a literal shotgun. Now, I don't know how that is possible, but it's safe to assume that the armed robbers in Washington are dumb. Nevertheless, my guy came out receiving praises from the people, and even the cops were surprised by how daring the chief of police was. However, on leaving the store, some detectives asked to speak with him, and of course, he responded to them like a cocky prick. But this is where they tell him that Nemesis, the guy that had been hunting and skinning chiefs of police around the world, had his eyes on Washington, and to be precise, Nemesis had his eyes on the chief of police, Morrow. They also added that Nemesis had already sent a card long in advance. Now, if you guys remember, I did say that Nemesis always sends a card ahead of time to his target. This card always carried the target's name, date, time of death, and of course, the condition for death. Now, I want you to take note of this because we are coming back to this. It is very important. Now, the chief of police, also known as Morrow, had long been familiar with Nemesis' handiwork around the globe, and he knew not to joke with this psychopath. Immediately, he ordered the second in charge, which is this guy, to put his family into protective custody. But here's the twist. Even though we know that Morrow is the target, Nemesis does not go after him, at least not directly. Instead, like a proper madman, Nemesis first chipped away at any possible safety net the chief of police might have. And what better safety net to rip apart than the president of the United States himself? We get to see that the Air Force One, which is the carrier plane for the president of the United States, is under a one-man attack. The jet protecting it on the sides are blown to to bits. Now, while this caused a lot of chaos within the plane, Nemesis stood on its wings, enjoying the beauty of his chaos. Again, does this remind you of this guy? Back to the story. Nemesis made his way to the cockpit and baptized the pilot with bullets, after which he hijacked the plane himself and rammed it nozzle first into a city, killing hundreds of thousands of innocent people. Bonus mark could get to see a gas explosion. But just when you think that this is the worst thing this cancerous tumor can do, he goes live on television to boast to the entire world of his achievement. Nemesis was even kind enough to announce that he had kidnapped the president. Nemesis was kind enough to announce that he had kidnapped the president of the United States and was simply interested in frustrating the chief of police of Washington. And of course, he did this while the president of the United States was on his knees. You guys remember the origin story of Nemesis, right? It turns out that the chief of police, Morrow, was responsible for what had happened to Nemesis' family. We also learned that the other cops around the world were simply practice, and Morrow had been his target all along. Now, a little side note here. Nemesis, like Batman, had strict rules on himself, which is something I kind of admire, honestly, because how do you become an incredibly bad guy without discipline? One of which we see, because Nemesis never let anybody know his hideout, not even his henchmen. Bringing them to his hideout meant blindfolding them. Now, I don't know about you guys, but this kind of reminds me of the Batcave. Another rule to note, Nemesis gets new henchmen for every hunting job in a new state. He has never repeated the use of them and will never repeat the use of them. They all retire with about $10 million after each job. Now, if you guys are still not convinced of this guy's skill, just know that before coming after the chief of police, he decided to make the man's life a living hell, much like a chef marinating a piece of meat for dinner. Every time Nemesis committed a crime, he would leave behind a riddle for the chief of police to solve. Like the time he blew up a stadium, the riddle was what gets wet when drying. Now, there were a bunch of other riddles, but that's not the point. The aim was to drive the chief of police mad with rage, while of course they tried to understand why Nemesis was so screwed up in the head. Finally, Morrow figured out the origin of the psychopath and decided to make a visit to the Anderson Foundation. What is most interesting here is that we see that even the Anderson family were searching for Nemesis, and his return was also a threat to their existence. After a conversation with the head of the family, Morrow was convinced that Nemesis had nothing to do with the family. Of course, this will come back to bite him in the ass later. If you guys remember, the president was still missing. The Pentagon decided to have a meeting about this. On this table were men that could shake the entire country with a single word. But before they could even come to an agreement, another problem had arrived. Everybody except for two people struggled to breathe. They were choking on poison. And this happened not just in this room, but all over the Pentagon. But guy, the balls on this asshole, he literally just strolled into the room like it was his father's backyard. The moment Morrow saw him, he emptied the clips of his gun. But Nemesis revealed that there was a bulletproof glass separating them, courtesy of the White House, of course. The only reason that Morrow and his assistant were still alive was because Nemesis wanted it so. And even then, while Morrow threatened to end Nemesis, Nemesis revealed that he had already taken the nuclear codes. But still, Nemesis did not kill this man. Then again, where was the fun if one could not play with their prey a little? However, Morrow was pissed off and he wanted revenge. I mean, he really wanted revenge. So he cooked up a plan to lure Nemesis in. If you guys remember, Morrow had his children and his wife split apart and put in protective custody. Morrow decided to take it a step further and lied that one of his children needed a heart transplant. As anyone will expect, Nemesis took the bait and raided the hospital. But this was all part of the plan. Even as Nemesis tried to get to safety, the police pursued him to the very end. And here we'll get to see some Batman similarities, like how this Benz he was driving suddenly split in two. Even I had to admit this was a really cool scene. I mean, come on guys, it's really cool. This unholy angel in white sprayed the police, tearing through their defenses like hot knife through butter. And when he got to the edge, he somersaulted in the air and destroyed the helicopter chasing him. And just like Batman, he has an underwater breathing apparatus. But that was not all, because we even get to see an underwater lightsaber. Wait, underwater lightsaber, how does that work? Unfortunately, after digging his way out of the tunnel, Nemesis ends up in a trap. He's surrounded on all sides by policemen armed to the teeth, and Morrow even takes the opportunity to take a swing at him. At this point, like you guys, I was wondering why Morrow did not just kill the psychopath and get it over with. But then I remember that the president was still nowhere to be found and they needed Nemesis to find the old man. Again, while reading this part, I thought that it was finally over. But no, this brother was still issuing threats, which got me wondering, was Nemesis going to pull another badass shit from his ass? Next, we see that Nemesis was being transported to prison and the guards on him were like 500,000. They even had helicopters trailing him. Now, our guy Morrow was feeling on top of the world. Paparazzi was on him like white on rice. And I don't blame him. After all, he managed to take down possibly the most terrifying criminal ever. Even the Andersons were happy and congratulated Morrow on such an achievement. But the best part was the fact that Morrow's wife and children were finally released from their protective custody and allowed to go home. His wife even praised Morrow on national television. However, just as they were rolling Nemesis Nemesis in, we get to see that Nemesis had already recruited very specific talents as his henchmen. There was the demolition specialist, the technology expert, and lastly, the identity thief. The identity thief was already dressed like a policeman and standing beside the Nemesis. And at the request of Nemesis, just like that, the lights went out. Instantly, the identity thief sprayed all the others with bullets, killing every policeman. When the lights came back on again, they were all dead. At this point, I thought Nemesis was just going to find a way and escape. After all, that was like the most logical thing to do. But no, this guy did the most Batman thing ever. It was like, I want to stretch my wings a little. And then he started with kicking and punching. Before you know it, there was blood everywhere. He destroyed organs, smashing heads and using his bare hands to tear apart necks. At this point, it became clear that this guy was not only brains, he was also bronze. After Nemesis was done, he did the most kind-hearted thing ever. He released all the prisoners into the city. It turned out that he had long planned for this and had hundreds of cars parked outside for the prisoners to escape with. And of course, they brought down the prison as they drove into the beautiful sunset. Moro, on the other hand, was still giving sexy, cocky eyes of confidence to the press. But then information reached him that the entire prison had been emptied. Instantly, a realization dawned on him. He had been played. Immediately, he ordered for his children to be placed once more in protective custody, but it was already too late. Nemesis' men had kidnapped them. This was the reason Nemesis had allowed himself to be captured in the first place. He wanted Moro's guard down so that he could kidnap his children. Now Moro's wife was devastated, but Moro tried to be a good husband and hug her to comfort her, pamper her, tell her not to cry and all those other boring stuff. But Nemesis suddenly sent another message. The message was a simple one. Nemesis knew that everybody had been looking at the chief of police like this untouchable man with a family that is empty of blemish and blame. To top it all, Moro was a Catholic and society looked up to him. But Nemesis wanted him to use his own hands to tear it all down in front of the public. Now Moro wondered why Nemesis wanted to bring him down so bad. But Nemesis was like, it is better you and your wife start talking or I'll expose you to the rest of the world. Tell me the 3 big secrets of your family. And here we start to hear some very crazy things about this very perfect chief of police. Firstly, his wife had cheated on him for 18 months, which is like a year and a half with an old partner of his many years ago. Secondly, his son was gay. And the last secret was that his perfect daughter had once gotten an abortion without telling him. The moment Moro confessed it all with his mouth, Nemesis agreed to release his children. But Nemesis was not so kind. He immediately sent breaking news to all the news outlets that the gay son of the chief of police had impregnated his own sister. Of course, this was something Nemesis had done under anesthesia, and the doctors confirmed that it was true. Triplets for that matter. And even if they attempted to abort the pregnancy, the womb had been rigged to collapse and she would never be able to have children again. This revelation made Moro's wife snap and she cursed at him and swore that he was a useless man and that it was all because of his job. Now Moro had become pissed and decided to take on the offense. And I am not going to lie to you, I was actually impressed with what I saw Moro do next. It turned out that Moro had an undercover spy who was secretly on Nemesis' team, and yes, he had been killing like the rest of the criminals. But such was the description of his job. I'm not complaining, but it don't make sense. So this spy flushed out all the information of Nemesis, and I mean everything. Let's nail this bitch. Now within the helicopter, Moro's assistant gave him the same card that had been sent when this entire freak show began. Blake Moro, March 12th at midnight. Flatline still counts. Weirdly enough, this day was March 12th and midnight was fast approaching. The night was deep and dark, so dark even the stars refused to bathe the earth with their glow. The residents of the Anderson family stood like an edifice on a mountaintop, looking down on all men, including the soldiers that crept towards it. Even as they rushed forward, their heavy boots kissed the falling leaves of the tree, rustling in their quick stealth. Their target had been proven to be within the facility, and all exits had been blocked. The break-in was swift, up the stairs, but immediately they made their way into Mr. Anderson's room. The sight they were met with was one none will ever forget. Mr. Anderson was strapped with enough C4 explosives to level a mountain. It was a trap, but it was too late for any of them to survive. Blood and liquid splashed all over the place. The next time Moro woke up, he was face to face with Nemesis himself. It turned out that Nemesis knew all along about the mole that had been planted in his team and had intentionally given out that he had been hiding as Mr. Anderson. Even worse, Nemesis had his own mole, one that had stood beside Moro from the very beginning. It was none other than Moro's deputy. The deputy straight up confessed his reason for betrayal. It was $10 million. However, even the deputy was not expecting what came next. Blood and brain matter splattered like watermelon all over the place. Moro asked why Nemesis was doing all the terrible things he was doing, and sincerely, I was also wondering the same thing. But Nemesis simply replied that he was simply rich and bored, and then he revealed Moro's wife and the President of the United States, and each one holding the detonator of the other. One look at this and you just know that Nemesis was about to play some sick Squidward game shit. The deal was simple, only one gets to leave. If the president were to press the button, Moro's wife would die. But if Moro's wife were to press the button, the President of the United States will die. But it gets even better. Nemesis gave Moro the opportunity to choose with a timer of just 30 seconds. While Moro's wife was scared as hell, the president showed an incredible act of bravery and stood in front of Nemesis. Now, like Nemesis, I was expecting the president to bust out with some kung fu action skills, but no, he immediately ordered Moro to click the button. The explosion was devastating, and the president had his insights now outside, some of which went all over Nemesis. While Nemesis complained about being bettered with old man's guts, Moro dove on him for the epic final battle. Hey guys, the battle is not over yet, but who do you think will win, Moro or Nemesis? Besides, Nemesis is still to do very terrible things like burying an old man alive and blackmailing a pilot into sleeping with minors, so ensure you watch part